I never thought I'd end up working nights at the old Dominion Logistics warehouse outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. Not really. I'd always pictured myself in a bright, bustling office, not surrounded by towering shelves of cardboard boxes and the echoing silence of a massive, forgotten space. But that's where life had led me after the dot-com bubble burst, and my ambitious tech startup dissolved into a pile of unpaid bills. My apartment in San Francisco was a distant memory, replaced by a borrowed couch and the persistent ache of failure that gnawed at me with every sunrise. It was mid-October, the kind of desert night where the air bites with a surprising chill, even after a warm day. My car, a beat-up Civic I'd driven across 3 states, barely hummed to life in the cool evenings, often needing a prayer or two to coax it into motion. I'd taken the job because it was the only one that didn't ask too many questions about my 2-year employment gap, a gaping hole that seemed to disqualify me from anything but the most desperate of opportunities. The manager, a gruff man named Mitch, had just grunted when I said I was available for the night shift, handing me a faded fluorescent vest and a key card. "Just keep the lights on," he'd said, his voice raspy from years of shouting over machinery. "And don't touch anything that ain't yours. It's a simple job if you keep your head down." The warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows and high bay lights that hummed like 1,000 angry bees trapped inside incandescent bulbs. The air smelled of concrete dust, stale cardboard, and something metallic, like old pennies, a scent that clung to my clothes and hair. It was too quiet for a place that handled so much freight. Most nights, it was just me and the automated forklifts, which moved with a strange, unnatural grace, their blinking lights cutting through the gloom like disembodied eyes. There were only 2 other night shift workers, both older guys who kept to themselves, preferring the isolation of their respective aisles, communicating only in grunts or curt nods. We were 3 lone islands in a sea of forgotten goods. My job was simple enough: receive incoming shipments, log them into the ancient computer system that still ran on an operating system older than I was, and direct the forklifts to store them. On my 3rd night, around 11:30, a strange package arrived. It wasn't on the manifest, no sender, no recipient, just a plain, unmarked wooden crate, about the size of a small coffin, nestled among a stack of generic cardboard boxes. I scanned the barcode, but the system just glitched, displaying error 404, item not found. I called Mitch, but his phone went straight to voicemail, ringing out into the vast empty space. The other 2 workers were nowhere in sight, swallowed by the cavernous expanse of the warehouse. I was truly alone. A peculiar hum emanated from the crate, a low vibration that I could feel in the soles of my boots, rising up through my legs. It wasn't loud, just present, like a deep resonant whisper that vibrated not through the air, but through the very floor beneath me. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the stack of boxes next to it, meticulously checking their labels, but my gaze kept returning. There was something about the wood too dark, too smooth, as if it had been polished by years of unseen hands, absorbing all light, all sound. It felt ancient, out of place. I decided to move it to the quarantine section, a dusty corner of the warehouse reserved for damaged goods or unidentifiable items, a place where forgotten things waited to be dealt with, or simply to rot. As I pushed the crate with a hand truck, the hum intensified, vibrating through the metal frame of the truck itself, and I felt a strange chill, not from the cold air, but from within my bones. My phone, which had been at full charge only minutes before, suddenly died, the screen going black without warning. The main lights flickered once, twice, then settled back into their dull drone, casting longer, more unsettling shadows. The silence that followed felt heavier, more oppressive. Back at my station, I swore I heard a faint scratching from the direction of the quarantine section. It sounded like fingernails dragging across wood, slow and deliberate, a rhythmic scrape that grated on my nerves. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drum in the silence. I told myself it was just the wind, or mice, or the settling of the old building. Burnout will do that to you, make you hear things, make you paranoid. But the sound persisted, a subtle, unsettling presence. I finished my shift, my eyes darting towards that dark corner every few minutes, half expecting to see something emerge from the gloom. As I looked up, the air outside felt thick and heavy, not like the usual crisp desert night, but dense with an unseen presence. My Civic sputtered to life with a hesitant cough, and I sped out of the lot, the scratching sound echoing in my mind, a phantom vibration that I couldn't shake. The next morning, Mitch called. "About that crate," he said, his voice unusually strained, losing its typical gruff edge. "It's gone." I froze, my coffee mug halfway to my lips. "Gone? What do you mean?" "Just gone." "And the quarantine section?" "It's empty." He paused, and I could almost hear him weighing his words. "Look, just forget about it. Some things are best left alone. Don't go poking around where you shouldn't." He hung up before I could ask another question. I still don't know what was in that crate, or where it went, but every time I drive past that warehouse, especially at night, I feel the hum, faint but persistent, vibrating through the ground, and I wonder what else is lingering in the shadows of places that shouldn't exist, what secrets they hold in their vast echoing depths. Story 2. The Clockout Receipt. My name is Sarah Chen, 27, fresh out of a relationship that left me feeling like a hollowed-out shell, an empty vessel drifting aimlessly. I'd moved to Portland, Oregon, seeking a fresh start, a place where the persistent rain might wash away the lingering bitterness and the residue of a broken heart. My last job, a promising marketing position, had evaporated overnight when the company downsized, a corporate euphemism for widespread layoffs, leaving me with an eviction notice and a dwindling savings account that was bleeding money faster than I could earn it. I ended up at the old, perpetually damp warehouse on NW 23rd Avenue. It wasn't glamorous, certainly not what I'd envisioned for my future, but it was a paycheck, a lifeline. The warehouse was a behemoth of stained concrete and flickering fluorescent lights, a place where the air always smelled of damp earth and stale packaging. My main duty was to organize returns, a never-ending tide of unwanted products that seemed to multiply overnight. The place closed at midnight, and most nights were quiet, just me and old Frank, the night supervisor, the man who smelled perpetually of stale coffee and profound regret, as if the very air around him was heavy with unspoken sorrows. He was fair, though, and didn't ask about the dark circles under my eyes, or the persistent tremor in my hands, silently acknowledging a shared weariness. It was a Tuesday in early November. Frank was finishing up his inventory checks. In the back, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, and I was restacking a precarious pile of mismatched electronics, trying to avoid a catastrophic collapse. The front chime, which usually signaled an employee entering or exiting, rang softly. I looked up, expecting to see a late worker, but no one was there. I shrugged it off, attributing it to faulty wiring or a stray draft. It happened sometimes. Later that night, as I was clocking out, my fingers fumbling with the time card, I noticed something peculiar. A receipt lay folded neatly on the time clock. It was printed from our system, time-stamped exactly 5 minutes before I'd arrived for my shift. But the receipt didn't list any items or a transaction ID. Instead, at the top, it read, Sarah Chen, employee ID 777, and underneath, where the total should have been, it simply stated, "You are already here." My blood ran cold. The words, so simple, yet so profoundly unsettling, echoed in my mind. I showed it to Frank. He just stared at it, his usual gruffness replaced by a pale, unsettling silence. His face drained of color. I didn't print this, Sarah. Nobody was here before you. I was the first one in. He wasn't the type to joke, and the fear in his eyes was genuine. The next night, I arrived early, my nerves frayed, and stretched thin like old elastic. I double-checked every corner of the warehouse, peering into shadows, listening for anything out of place. Nothing. But when I went to my locker, I found a small, antique key resting on top of my jacket. It wasn't mine. It was too old, too ornate. Attached to it was a faded, handwritten tag, Locker Room B, 27. My locker was Locker Room A, 24. I stared at the key, a chill tracing its way down my spine. Locker Room B was the old, disused section of the building supposedly condemned years ago due to structural instability and a lingering dampness. I looked out at the parking lot, empty, no one around. The security camera feed, which I checked later, showed a full minute of static just before I entered the locker room. A blank space where something should have been recorded. That week, things escalated with an unnerving precision. I found strange notes tucked into returned packages, their edges crisp, their messages chilling. He never left aisle 3. The lights in the back storage area would flicker wildly, sometimes going out for seconds at a time, plunging the vast space into absolute darkness before returning. Boxes we hadn't stocked in months, perfectly sealed and clean, as if new, would mysteriously appear on the shelves in places I'd just organized, disrupting my meticulous order. Once I swore I heard muffled voices from the old boiler room, a low murmur of conversation, even though it was locked and supposedly empty. Its rusted door chained shut. Frank started keeping a small, rusty crowbar on his desk, its worn handle polished by anxious hands. He said the place felt heavy, laden with an unspoken burden. He mentioned that the warehouse used to be an old meat-packing plant, decades ago, and there were rumors of a security guard who vanished without a trace during a snowstorm in the 90s. They found his flashlight still on, near the loading docks, its beam cutting through the falling snow. But no body, no sign of what became of him. I looked it up myself when I got home. It was true, a missing person cold case. The last night I worked there, it came to a head. Frank had left early, citing a family emergency, his face a mask of worry. I was alone, taping up labels after a system update, trying to ignore the prickle of unease. My headphones were in, trying to drown out the growing apprehension, when the emergency exit alarm beeped once, then again, then stopped, leaving a profound silence in its wake.
I ripped off my headphones, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Silence. Absolute silence. I walked towards the back door, passing aisle 3, my eyes darting into the darkened rows of shelves, and there he was, a tall figure, shrouded in a dark heavy coat, standing perfectly still. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening intently to something I couldn't hear. He held out an old, yellowed receipt, just like before, but this time something was scrawled on the back in a looping, unsettling hand. "Check your locker. The key works now."
I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. But he didn't move. He just stood there, watching, his presence a heavy weight in the air. I stumbled into the old locker room, my hands fumbling with the antique key, which now felt impossibly heavy in my shaking fingers. It turned with a soft click, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. Inside, on the bare metal shelf, was a single dusty pair of work boots, and underneath them, a small, grimy name tag. It read, Frank, not the current Frank, not the Frank who smelled of coffee and regret, but an old faded name tag, from a different era, a different person. I quit the next morning, didn't even call. I just left the key and my badge on Frank's desk, walking away from that place without a single glance back. I told my friends I'd found freelance work, a safer, more palatable explanation. Now I live on the 7th floor of a downtown apartment building. The stairwell lights stay on all night. There's a security camera pointed straight at my door, a small, unblinking eye that offers a sliver of comfort. Still, sometimes I find strange notes under my welcome mat, their paper crisp, their messages chillingly familiar. No items listed, just my name. Sometimes an aisle number, sometimes the words, "He's almost through." And every time I think maybe it's over, that I finally escaped, I hear a soft, deliberate tapping on my window, a rhythm that doesn't match the rain or the city noise, a sound that seems to originate from within my own mind. And I remember the words on that first receipt. You are already here. If a place that shouldn't exist gives you a receipt for your presence, a chilling confirmation of your being, do you accept it, or do you trust your instincts and run, without looking back? It was mid-October, the kind of desert night where the air bites with a surprising chill, even after a warm day. My car, a beat-up Civic I'd driven across 3 states, barely hummed to life in the cool evenings, often needing a prayer or two to coax it into motion. I'd taken the job because it was the only one that didn't ask too many questions about my 2-year employment gap, a gaping hole that seemed to disqualify me from anything but the most desperate of opportunities. The manager, a gruff man named Mitch, had just grunted when I said I was available for the night shift, handing me a faded fluorescent vest and a key card. "Just keep the lights on," he'd said, his voice raspy from years of shouting over machinery. "And don't touch anything that ain't yours. It's a simple job if you keep your head down." The warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows and high bay lights that hummed like 1,000 angry bees trapped inside incandescent bulbs. The air smelled of concrete dust, stale cardboard, and something metallic, like old pennies, a scent that clung to my clothes and hair. It was too quiet for a place that handled so much freight. Most nights, it was just me and the automated forklifts, which moved with a strange, unnatural grace, their blinking lights cutting through the gloom like disembodied eyes. There were only 2 other night shift workers, both older guys who kept to themselves, preferring the isolation of their respective aisles, communicating only in grunts or curt nods. We were 3 lone islands in a sea of forgotten goods. My job was simple enough: receive incoming shipments, log them into the ancient computer system that still ran on an operating system older than I was, and direct the forklifts to store them. On my 3rd night, around 11:30, a strange package arrived. It wasn't on the manifest, no sender, no recipient, just a plain, unmarked wooden crate, about the size of a small coffin, nestled among a stack of generic cardboard boxes. I scanned the barcode, but the system just glitched, displaying error 404, item not found. I called Mitch, but his phone went straight to voicemail, ringing out into the vast empty space. The other 2 workers were nowhere in sight, swallowed by the cavernous expanse of the warehouse. I was truly alone. A peculiar hum emanated from the crate, a low vibration that I could feel in the soles of my boots, rising up through my legs. It wasn't loud, just present, like a deep resonant whisper that vibrated not through the air, but through the very floor beneath me. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the stack of boxes next to it, meticulously checking their labels, but my gaze kept returning. There was something about the wood too dark, too smooth, as if it had been polished by years of unseen hands, absorbing all light, all sound. It felt ancient, out of place. I decided to move it to the quarantine section, a dusty corner of the warehouse reserved for damaged goods or unidentifiable items, a place where forgotten things waited to be dealt with, or simply to rot. As I pushed the crate with a hand truck, the hum intensified, vibrating through the metal frame of the truck itself, and I felt a strange chill, not from the cold air, but from within my bones. My phone, which had been at full charge only minutes before, suddenly died, the screen going black without warning. The main lights flickered once, twice, then settled back into their dull drone, casting longer, more unsettling shadows. The silence that followed felt heavier, more oppressive. Back at my station, I swore I heard a faint scratching from the direction of the quarantine section. It sounded like fingernails dragging across wood, slow and deliberate, a rhythmic scrape that grated on my nerves. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drum in the silence. I told myself it was just the wind, or mice, or the settling of the old building. Burnout will do that to you, make you hear things, make you paranoid. But the sound persisted, a subtle, unsettling presence. I finished my shift, my eyes darting towards that dark corner every few minutes, half expecting to see something emerge from the gloom. As I looked up, the air outside felt thick and heavy, not like the usual crisp desert night, but dense with an unseen presence. My Civic sputtered to life with a hesitant cough, and I sped out of the lot, the scratching sound echoing in my mind, a phantom vibration that I couldn't shake. The next morning, Mitch called. "About that crate," he said, his voice unusually strained, losing its typical gruff edge. "It's gone." I froze, my coffee mug halfway to my lips. "Gone? What do you mean?" "Just gone." "And the quarantine section?" "It's empty." He paused, and I could almost hear him weighing his words. "Look, just forget about it. Some things are best left alone. Don't go poking around where you shouldn't." He hung up before I could ask another question. I still don't know what was in that crate, or where it went, but every time I drive past that warehouse, especially at night, I feel the hum, faint but persistent, vibrating through the ground, and I wonder what else is lingering in the shadows of places that shouldn't exist, what secrets they hold in their vast echoing depths. Story 3. The Silent Watchman. Before that night in Henderson, Nevada, I believed that fear was a primal scream, a sudden jolt that seized your breath. But that's not how it always works. Sometimes, fear is a quiet hum, a slow drip, a creeping realization that something is fundamentally wrong, a subtle shift in the air that whispers of unseen dangers. I was 24, living in my aunt's borrowed apartment after my father's unexpected death, a loss that had shattered my world and left me adrift. My college plans had unraveled, tuition bills piling up faster than I could earn them, a suffocating weight on my shoulders. The night shift at the old warehouse on Horizon Ridge Parkway was supposed to be a temporary solution, a place to gather myself, to find solid ground before re-enrolling. My manager, a tough-as-nails woman named Brenda, chain-smoked and called everyone pal without a hint of affection, her voice gravelly from years of shouting over industrial noise. but she was fair, and she left me alone, which was all I asked for. I worked 6 evenings a week, mostly alone after the last delivery truck left, the rumble of its engine fading into the vast desert night. I liked the rhythm of it, the way certain forklifts always hummed louder than others, the comforting smell of recycled plastic and stale coffee that permeated the air. Still, some nights were off. You get to know a space when you're alone in it long enough. Every creak, every groan, every shadow. I could tell when something was out of place, when a pallet was leaning just a bit too far, or the inventory tags had been shifted ever so slightly, a subtle disruption in the established order. The backroom buzzer had started chiming at odd times, usually with no one on the other side, just the empty concrete. Loading dock, Brenda said. It was faulty wiring, a common occurrence in old buildings. I didn't argue, but there were moments, usually just past 10:30, when I'd glance out at the loading dock and catch a beat-up pickup truck idling in the shadows for too long, its engine barely audible, its presence a dark stain on the landscape. Once, I swore I saw someone just standing there near the dumpsters, not moving, not smoking, just still, a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the city lights in the distance. They seemed to be watching, waiting. That Friday started normally. Hot day, sharp blue sky, a slow, uneventful pace. I checked in our inventory shipment. 8 crates, mostly cheap household goods, destined for various retail outlets. My closing partner called in sick, stomach flu, Brenda said over the phone, her sigh echoing through the receiver. "You okay flying solo?" she asked. I told her, yeah, even though I wasn't sure. Not since things started feeling watched, since the shadows seemed to lengthen and deepen with each passing night. Around 10:46 p.m., I locked the front doors and began my routine. Clean the counters until they gleamed, take out the trash, count the drawer with meticulous precision. Then the buzzer rang. Not the regular doorbell, not the register, the backroom buzzer, the one that should only go off if someone's at the employee entrance, a sound that always meant an arriving coworker or a late delivery. I stepped into the hallway and checked the camera feed. The screen was grainy and delayed, flickering with static, but clear enough. No one at the door, just the empty rear loading area and the dumpsters to the right, sitting innocently in the dim light. Still my skin prickled, a warning sensation I couldn't ignore. I locked the hallway door behind me, double-checking the deadbolt, and returned to the counter. Maybe I was just tired, my imagination playing tricks on me. In the quiet of the night, at 10:58, someone knocked at the front. A man in a dark hoodie stood on the other side of the glass, squinting against the reflection, hood up, hands in pockets. I hesitated before unlocking, a flicker of unease already stirring within me. That night, the air had cooled fast, and something about the way he shifted from foot to foot, his posture almost too relaxed, made my stomach tighten. But I opened the door. It was almost closing time after all. "Sorry," he said, stepping inside, his voice low and even. "Didn't realize you were closed." "We're technically still open," I told him, my voice steady despite the apprehension coiling in my gut. "Just starting closing tasks." He nodded, eyes scanning the shelves with a casual air, taking in every detail. Car trouble. Parked out by the old diner next door. My buddy's on his way. But I left my phone in the car. Figured I'd grab a flashlight. Maybe some duct tape, just something to get me by. I watched him move slowly, deliberately, like he was in no rush to leave. His movements almost too fluid. The front lights buzzed above him, flickering once, a momentary blackout that made my breath catch. I swallowed hard, trying to quell the rising panic. "We've got some flashlights In aisle 4, tapes on the end cap, near hardware. He moved that way, dragging his feet a little, his eyes still scanning, lingering on certain spots. I kept my eyes on the monitor, a knot forming in my stomach. That's when I saw it. Camera 2, rear lot view. A figure crouched low by the side door, utterly still, holding something long and thin, metal. Maybe a crowbar. The hoodie guy was just a distraction, a diversion. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, a frantic rhythm against the silence. "Hey," I called down the aisle, my voice a little louder than I intended. "You said your friend's out back." He paused, didn't answer right away. "Nah," he finally said, his voice too casual, too quick, a subtle shift in tone that confirmed my suspicions. "Just me. He's on the way." I didn't respond. My right hand moved under the counter, fingers curling around the silent alarm button. A small, plastic square that felt impossibly cold. It didn't beep, didn't click, just a dead silence. I hoped it worked, hoped the signal had gone through. I stepped back, putting more distance between us. "I'll check on that flashlight for you," I said, my voice strained. He gave me a smile, small, tight, a mere pulling of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Appreciate it." I walked to the storage hallway, locked the door behind me with a decisive click, and grabbed the aluminum bat we kept next to the mop sink. Its cool, smooth surface, a surprising comfort in my hand. I stared at the monitor, watching the man in the hoodie slowly approach the counter again, his hands still in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the empty space where I had been. Outside, the crouched figure vanished from the screen, dissolving into the darkness. It froze, my blood turning to ice. Then I saw it. Camera 3, side door. The guy was moving again, fast. A blur of motion toward the back employee entrance, the one I'd just locked seconds earlier. He reached it, pulled the handle, with a desperate yank. Nothing. Locked. He stood there a moment, like he wasn't sure what to do, then turned and ran, disappearing into the night. The hoodie guy inside moved for the exit too. Didn't speak. Didn't even look at me. He slipped through the door and vanished into the night, swallowed by the darkness. The police arrived 12 minutes later, their sirens a welcome, albeit delayed, sound in the quiet evening. They swept the perimeter, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Took my statement with practiced efficiency. I told them everything I could, every detail, every subtle shift I'd noticed. Deputy Ramirez jotted notes like he'd heard it all before, his pen scratching against his notepad. "Looks like they were working together," he said, his voice flat. "Not their first time either. You did the right thing, locking that door. Any way to ID them." He shook his head. "No plates, no facial recognition, probably just passing through, looking for opportunity." That word made me sick. Opportunity. Like I was a moment away from becoming someone's payday, a statistic. The footage showed everything. One distracts, one breaks in. Clean, practiced, near silent. If I hadn't locked that door when I did, if I had hesitated for even a moment longer, I don't want to think about what would have happened. The images flickered behind my eyes for weeks. The next few shifts were uneventful. A deceptive calm. I started bringing pepper spray and keeping the lights brighter, a futile attempt to push back the encroaching shadows. I double-checked locks with obsessive care, stopped stepping out after dark, even for a moment, every time someone lingered too long by the shipping manifests or asked too many questions about our procedures. I felt my spine tighten, my muscles clench. 3 nights later, a woman and her young son banged on the glass at 11:30 p.m. Their car had stalled, smoke curling from under the hood. The boy was crying, his small face streaked with tears. Rain streaked their faces, plastering their hair to their foreheads. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock, my instinct screaming at me to keep the door shut. For half a second, I didn't move, paralyzed by the memory of the night before. But then I saw the kid's face, red and puffy, clutching a soaked action figure, and something in me softened. I opened the door. She looked at me like I'd taken too long, her eyes holding a mixture of relief and irritation. I made them hot cocoa in the break room microwave, the sweet scent filling the small space, wrapped the boy in a spare blanket. The mom cried once, softly, tears of exhaustion and gratitude, thanking me over and over. I just nodded, unable to speak. That was the moment I realized how fear could make you cruel, how it could harden your heart. That hesitation might be what saves you, but sometimes it costs someone else. A moment of kindness, a chance for help. 2 weeks later, a man checked in with a stack of $20 bills and a voice that didn't match his smile. Too smooth, too practiced. Said his name was Gerald. Said he used to manage a warehouse in Phoenix. His eyes scanning my face as if looking for a reaction. He asked if I worked here alone, asked what time we usually closed. Small talk. Nothing too strange on the surface, except he kept glancing at the side hallway like he was mapping it, memorizing every turn, every shadow. I lied and said my coworker was in the back, unloading a truck, hoping he'd believe me. I rang him up and watched him leave. He didn't buy anything, just left the money on the counter and walked out. That night, I stayed past my shift, just watching the cameras, monitoring every inch of the warehouse. Nothing happened, but I didn't stop checking, didn't stop looking for the slightest anomaly. I quit the following Monday. I didn't give notice, just handed Brenda my badge and said I needed to go, that I couldn't do it anymore. She didn't ask why. Maybe she knew. She'd worked that warehouse long enough to sense when someone had seen too much, when the shadows had become too deep. Now I work at a logistics office near the airport, day shifts only. I carry a small utility knife on my keychain. I never park near alleys, and I never ignore that twinge in my gut, that subtle whisper of unease, because what I learned in that fluorescent lit warehouse on Horizon Ridge is that evil doesn't come in with fangs and fire. Sometimes it wears a smile. It asks for help. It leans on your instinct to be kind, and it waits for you to forget to lock the door, to let down your guard for a single fatal moment. The scariest part of that night wasn't what happened. It was what almost did. What's the cost of ignoring your instincts when someone asks for help? But something deep down tells you not to open the door, a chilling premonition of danger. Story 4. The Curator's Collection. Long before I ever set foot in Charleston, West Virginia, I used to think that danger wore a mask. Something obvious, something you'd recognize by the chill it sent through your spine, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. But that's not how it works. Not always. Sometimes danger sounds like a friendly voice in the wrong place, a voice that is just a bit too smooth. Sometimes it looks like kindness that comes too easily, an offer that feels too good to be true. I left Dayton because I had to. I'd filed a complaint. HR, police, all the channels they tell you to trust, all the avenues that are supposed to offer protection. The man I reported had tenure, friends in high places, and a kind of smile that people believed over mine, a disarming charm that masked a cruel core, inconsistent narrative, they said, lack of corroborating evidence. What that really meant was he had power and I didn't. What that really meant was I was alone. After that, I was the girl who cried wolf, the girl who made things uncomfortable, an unwelcome presence. My apartment lease got yanked on a technicality, a flimsy excuse. Friends stopped replying to texts. Their silence, a deafening roar. I stopped replying to myself. My own voice, lost in the cacophony of doubt. The truth is, when something bad happens, and the people around you don't believe it, it doesn't just hurt, it erases you. You stop trusting your memory, your voice, your instincts, everything that defines you. You shrink, becoming smaller and smaller, until you're almost invisible. Only packed everything that fit into my old minivan, a vehicle that had seen better days, and left Dayton like a ghost escaping its own haunted house. At first I told myself I was just taking a trip, a break, a few days to clear my head, to find some semblance of peace. But with every hour I drove, it felt more like fleeing, a desperate escape. I spent nights in truck stops, in diners, once behind a boarded-up antique shop with my coat over the window and a tire iron clutched in my hand, my knuckles white with tension. I didn't sleep so much as fade in and out of panic, a restless, anxious state of being. By the time I got to Charleston, West Virginia, I was out of options. My account balance had 2 digits, a grim testament to my dwindling resources. I hadn't eaten in a day and a half. My stomach a hollow ache. I pulled into a parking lot on McCorkle Avenue because the old warehouse sign, Carson's Curios, was lit, a beacon in the twilight, and I saw a big now hiring sign taped inside the window. I went in hoping I could fill out an application, maybe use the bathroom. Just a moment of normalcy. I didn't expect Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was the warehouse owner. Middle-aged, built like a redwood, walked with a slight shuffle, as if carrying the weight of the old building on his shoulders. His name tag was a polished brass plate, hinting at long years of ownership, and he carried a ring of keys that clinked like a medieval gauntlet as he moved. He didn't ask many questions, just looked at my ID, asked if I could lift heavy boxes and work the closing shift, and then pointed at the back. "You start tonight if you want," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I said yes. So fast I sounded desperate, because the job was simple: organize rare books, dust antique furniture until it gleamed, take out the trash, the mundane tasks of maintenance. After 9 p.m., when the doors locked and the last customer had left, it was just me and the low hum of the dehumidifiers, a steady rhythmic drone that suited me fine. I didn't want people, I didn't want conversation, I wanted quiet routine and time to figure out what came next, to mend the pieces of my shattered life. The warehouse was run down, certainly. The left display light in aisle 7 flickered like a dying star, casting long, dancing shadows. The storage room always smelled like mothballs and ancient paper, a scent that transported you to another time. Some nights, the old display cases would creak, and Mr. Henderson would just sigh, a sound of resignation. But it was a job, and it didn't ask anything of me besides showing up and doing the work. It took me 3 weeks to start noticing the man. Tuesdays, always Tuesdays, around 8:40 p.m., he'd stroll in like he had time to waste, an unhurried confidence in his stride. Tall, maybe 6'2", gray fedora pulled low, dark trench coat, polished leather shoes that click softly on the concrete floor. He never bought anything, just wandered through the antique toys, running a gloved finger over a dusty doll, lingered over the old records, sometimes hovered near the display of taxidermied animals, like he was pretending to make a choice, a silent, unsettling presence. But his eyes, they were always scanning, not the objects, not the curiosities, but the reflections in the glass, watching the store, watching me. At first I thought he might just be another lonely collector, seeking solace among forgotten treasures, but there was something too intentional about it, too slow, too present, too aware. His gait had a rhythm to it, as if he'd walked these aisles before, like he knew where the blind spots were, where the cameras couldn't see. He didn't speak until the fourth visit. I was reshelving old photo albums in aisle 7, crouched down in the narrow strip of space near the end cap, lost in the faded images of strangers. My back was to him. I heard his shoes click softly on the concrete before his voice, a low, smooth rumble. They always leave you here alone, don't they? His voice was casual, measured, but unsettlingly close. I didn't look up. Stores closing soon? I asked, my voice flat, trying to sound bored. No reply. When I finally glanced toward the front doors, he was already halfway out, a dark silhouette against the streetlights. The next day, I mentioned him to Mr. Henderson. "You get weirdos," he said, unfazed, his eyes still on his paperwork. "It's an antique shop. Just keep the stun gun on you." He wasn't wrong. Most places like this attracted oddballs, eccentrics, and the occasional suspicious character. But something about this guy, it wasn't just his presence, it was his pattern. Same time, same day, same eyes that seemed to see too much. Then the woman showed up. It was a Tuesday again, 10 minutes to close. She was tall, blonde, and dressed like she had just walked out of an art gallery. Sharp blazer, tailored pants, heels too clean for the street. As if she floated above the grime, she browsed the porcelain dolls aisle with an air of disinterest before walking straight toward me while I was wrapping a fragile vase in the front, her steps silent and deliberate. "You work here full time?" she asked, her voice all warmth, a carefully constructed facade. I nodded. "Yeah, you're good at it. You have this calm about you. That's rare in this line of work." I didn't respond. I didn't want to encourage it. Didn't want to invite further interaction. She smiled wider, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "I run a historical preservation group over in Huntington. Art restoration, artifact recovery, healing retreats. I talk to a lot of women in these positions. You'd be surprised how many just need someone to say, 'You deserve better,' to acknowledge their struggles." I felt a cold pinch in my stomach, a familiar tightening of dread. She leaned in a little, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "If you ever want to talk, I could grab you a coffee. I'll be around for a few days, finishing up a project." "I'm okay," I said, forcing my tone flat, trying to convey a sense of dismissal. Then she said it, quiet, almost too quiet, a chilling whisper. "You're not what I expected." Her eyes stayed on mine for half a second too long, a subtle but unnerving gaze that seemed to pierce through me. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly on the floor. Something inside me locked down, a protective barrier snapping into place. Later that night, I waited until I was alone, until the silence of the warehouse was complete, and slipped into the dusty back office. The security monitors were old, grainy black and white feeds, one for each corner of the warehouse, flickering with ghostly images. I rewound the footage. There it was, the man arriving first, parking near the dumpsters, a dark shadow against the distant streetlights. 5 minutes later, she pulls in. Same black sedan, different entrances, a coordinated effort. They didn't acknowledge each other on camera, but the timing was too clean, too rehearsed to be coincidental. At 9:03, just after we locked the doors, the feed to the back hallway froze for 6 seconds. Nothing but static. Then it came back, a figure at the emergency door, trying the handle once, twice, a faint rustle of clothing. I didn't scream. I didn't run blindly. I hid, crawled into the large antique chest that sat in the corner, its heavy lid closing with a soft thud and locked it from the inside, hoping the old latch would hold. My hands fumbled for my phone. Texted Mr. Henderson. Someone tried the back door. Please come now. Urgent. 7 minutes. That's all it took. His truck's headlights flooded the lot, cutting through the darkness. I peeked out through a crack in the chest, in time to see the black sedan peeling out, tires screeching on the cracked pavement, disappearing into the night. Mr. Henderson was pale when he saw the footage, his usual gruffness replaced by a look of shock. He called the police. They took statements, checked the tapes, said similar reports had come in from other towns, at her small businesses, always a man and a woman, always night shifts, always targeting women alone. Their modus operandi disturbingly consistent. I never went back. I stayed at a women's shelter 2 towns over, a place of safety, a refuge. I slept with a chair jammed under the doorknob, its legs digging into the floor. I kept a stun gun next to my pillow, its cold, hard plastic a small comfort. It's been 3 months. I still don't go anywhere on Tuesdays after dark. I still hear her voice. You're not what I expected. And I wonder what happens to the women who are what they expected, the ones who fit their chilling criteria. Story 5. The Midnight Cleaner. I had a habit of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I guess it started in childhood, watching my mother swallow her feelings behind polite smiles, folding laundry like it might fold away the silence in our house, the unspoken tensions. I carried that into adulthood like a sickness I never named, a silent burden. That's how I ended up staying with Dave, as long as I did, far longer than I should have, not because I didn't know he was lying to me, but because I didn't want to make a mess. Didn't want to disturb the fragile peace. And when the truth finally came out, that he'd been cheating for months, that his phone wasn't dead on those nights he never came home, but deliberately off, I didn't yell, I didn't throw a single plate. I just woke up one morning, grabbed my keys, and left. A quiet, definitive departure. The road south felt like something between a breakdown and a cleanse, a desperate attempt to purge myself of the bitterness. I drove without music, just the low hum of the tires on the asphalt, and my own thoughts chasing each other in endless circles, a relentless loop of regret and disbelief. I stayed off highways, stuck to the back roads where Spanish moss dripped from the trees like ghostly tears, and old farmhouses peeked out from behind rusting fences, their windows like empty eyes. I didn't know where I was going until I hit the outskirts of Tallahassee and pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel with a faded sign that read, "Traveler's Rest," its letters peeling, its promise of solace tenuous. It was almost charming in the way abandoned things sometimes are, holding a melancholic beauty. The room was musty, but clean enough, a thin blanket of dust covering everything. I dropped my bag, the sound echoing in the small space, sat on the bed, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead, a hypnotic whirl. It was the first time I'd stopped moving in almost 9 hours, and the stillness made my skin itch, a nervous energy rising to the surface. Around 8:45 p.m. I realized I hadn't eaten all day, my stomach a distant, forgotten sensation. There was an old industrial cleaning supply warehouse, a few blocks down, still lit up like a beacon in the encroaching darkness, with a few cars in the lot, their engines silent. I figured I could grab something from their small convenience section, some crackers, maybe a microwave meal, and avoid the awkwardness of sitting alone at a restaurant, drawing unwanted attention. It wasn't about fear, not then, just exhaustion and not wanting to be noticed, to be seen in my state of disarray. When I walked in, the place was nearly empty. A man in a work uniform was at the register, his cart full of heavy-duty degreaser and industrial floor wax, the tools of his trade. The cashier, a guy in his 20s, with close-cropped hair and sharp, assessing eyes that seemed to take in every detail, gave me a curt nod, his expression unreadable. His name tag read, Kyle. He looked up from scanning and said, "Cold night to be out." I smiled politely, muttered something about passing through, and ducked into the food aisle, seeking anonymity among the shelves. I wasn't planning to stay long, just a quick grab and go, but something about the place. It's quiet. The way the overhead lights buzzed, just slightly, a subtle vibration. The warmth compared to the biting cold outside slowed me down. I wandered longer than I meant to, letting my eyes slide over industrial-sized bottles of bleach, giant rolls of paper towels, half-empty shelves of safety gloves, a silent testament to the daily grind. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until my shoulders started to unknot, a slow release of pent-up anxiety. When I made it back to the front with a frozen dinner and a travel-sized bottle of hand sanitizer, the other customer was gone. It was just me and Kyle now. He didn't say much as he rang up my things, his movements precise and efficient. But when he handed me the bag, he smiled a little wider, a small, unsettling curve of his lips. "You staying local?" I hesitated, a sudden prickle of unease. "Just a night, passing through." He nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on mine for a beat too long. "Well, we're here till 10. You need anything else? You come back." It was the way he said "we," like there was someone else working, even though the store had been dead silent since the other customer left. No footsteps, no voices. But I didn't question it. I said thanks and pushed through the heavy front doors, feeling an inexplicable urge to get away. I didn't see anyone else on my way back to the motel. The streets were dark and quiet, except for a stray dog darting under a porch, a fleeting shadow. My room was exactly how I left it, unchanged, untouched, and for a few hours I managed to feel okay, to push the unsettling encounter to the back of my mind. But when I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, my sleep-addled brain still fuzzy, I saw it tucked under my windshield wiper, a note written in narrow, precise block letters, startlingly white against the dark glass. "Glad you made it safe." My stomach turned, a cold, sickening lurch. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, not the name of the motel, not even the street, and yet someone knew. I told myself, maybe someone just saw me walk that direction. Maybe it was nothing, just a random act of kindness. But I couldn't sleep after that. I pulled the curtain aside and sat in the dark for hours, watching the parking lot, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom. Nothing moved. Still, something felt profoundly wrong, like I wasn't alone.
The next night, I told myself I was just being paranoid. That's what people always say, isn't it? That's what they want you to believe. I went back to the cleaning supply warehouse, drawn by a morbid curiosity, part of me hoping I'd see Kyle again, hoping to confront him, to just get it out in the open, to demand an explanation. The place was almost empty again, a ghostly echo of its daytime self. Kyle was behind the counter, but this time he looked different, more alert, his eyes sharper, like he'd been waiting for something for me.
"You came back," he said, voice low, almost a whisper, as if sharing a secret. "Yeah," I replied, placing a bottle of water and some headache pills on the counter, trying to keep my voice even. "Couldn't sleep." He smiled again, a subtle, knowing smirk. "Funny. I thought about you last night." I stiffened, every muscle in my body tensing. He saw it. "Don't worry," he said, his tone still casual. "Didn't mean anything weird. You just looked kind of lost. And I worry about lost things." I nodded, forced a smile that felt brittle on my face. "Yeah, well, long week." As he bagged my things, he leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on mine. "You know, I've got a break in 10 minutes. If you want to hang back, talk a bit. I could tell you some stories about this place you wouldn't believe. I felt my chest tighten, a cold dread spreading through me. I managed a polite, maybe another time, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look offended, just watched me as I walked out, his eyes following my every step. I could feel his eyes on my back the entire way. A tangible weight this time. I checked my car before getting in, peering into the back seat. Under the seats, no notes, no one in sight, but I drove around the block twice before heading back, just in case, just to be sure. The note came again, the next night. This time, it was taped to my door, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood. You don't have to be alone. I can help. I didn't go back to the warehouse. I packed my bag, threw it in the car, and sat behind the wheel for 15 minutes, heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. The police. What could I say? That a cashier maybe left me a couple of notes, that he made me feel uneasy? I hadn't seen him do anything illegal. I hadn't even seen a camera in the lot. There was no proof, no evidence. I decided I'd leave at dawn, get back on the highway, put some real distance between me and whatever was happening in this town. But around 3:30 a.m., I heard knocking, not loud, just soft taps, deliberate and rhythmic. 3 of them, then silence. I didn't move, my body rigid, frozen in fear, just stared at the door, my breath caught in my throat. Another 3 taps, a pause, then the doorknob rattled, a soft, insistent sound that broke the trance. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and ran. No shoes, no jacket, just bare feet on cold pavement, the chill seeping into my bones. I didn't look back until I was in the car with the doors locked and the engine running. The roar of the engine, a comforting sound. Someone was standing at the corner of the building, just beyond the motel light, a dark silhouette against the deeper shadows, not moving, just watching. I drove. I didn't stop until I hit I-95, the highway a ribbon of escape. I didn't go home right away. I stayed with a friend outside Jacksonville, someone I hadn't seen in years, a safe harbor. I told her some version of the story, edited, safer, less alarming, a sanitized account. A few days later, out of a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain, I called the cleaning supply warehouse. A woman answered, her voice brisk. I asked for Kyle. She paused. There's no one here by that name, she said, her tone firm. Never has been. I hung up, a cold dread washing over me. I checked the receipts I'd kept in my bag. No name listed, just Cleaner 007. I looked up the warehouse on Google Street View, zooming in on the blurry images. In the most recent photo, someone was standing just inside the glass door, a shadowy figure. I swear it was him, even blurry, even distorted by the reflection. I recognized that face, that unsettling gaze. I never found out who he really was, or how he knew where I was staying. I don't think I want to know. Some truths are better left buried, but sometimes I wonder if he's still there, waiting for someone else to walk in, just before closing. Maybe someone who won't leave when the doors lock behind them, who will accept his chilling offer of comfort, and maybe next time, he won't wait so long to knock. If someone made you feel truly seen, truly understood, but only after watching you without your consent, without your knowledge, would you still call it loneliness, or something far darker, a sinister form of possession? Story 6. The Unclaimed Deliveries. It's strange how quiet the world gets when your life falls apart. I don't mean the kind of silence you get in a library, or when you're alone in the woods, a peaceful, natural quiet. I mean that hollow, static silence that follows a moment of total collapse, like the world has paused, unsure what to do with you now, holding its breath. It's a silence that screams. The day I found myself in Dumas, Arkansas, it had been raining off and on for hours, a relentless dreary drizzle that seemed to mirror my internal state. My phone buzzed every now and then with messages I didn't have the heart to read. Mostly automated payment reminders or final notices from creditors, each one a fresh stab of anxiety. I hadn't seen my dog in 6 weeks, a painful absence that felt like a limb had been torn away. Hadn't been inside a real home in 2 months, sleeping in the cramped confines of my car, my world reduced to 4 wheels and a steering wheel. I'd been chasing Wi-Fi from parking lots, hoping each new day might land me a gig that paid enough to get me back on my feet, to reclaim some semblance of my old life, but every opportunity seemed just out of reach, like chasing headlights on a foggy road, always disappearing into the mist. By the time I rolled into town, my gas tank was barely hanging on, the needle hovering precariously on eve. I pulled into the parking lot of an old decommissioned postal sorting facility on South Main Street, with just enough change to maybe buy a cup of instant coffee from the vending machine or a stale cracker, a meager offering. The rain was steady, light, but constant, like the sky couldn't be bothered to pour, just a continuous weeping. I remember that detail, because when I stepped inside the building, the warmth hit me in a way that made my throat tighten. A sudden rush of emotion. Flickering fluorescent lights cast a sickly yellow glow. That dusty, ozone-like smell of old electronics permeated the air, and shelves half-stocked with forgotten mail sacks, and oddly comforting. And behind the counter, surprisingly, was a woman, maybe 24, blue jumpsuit, high ponytail, eyes that didn't flinch when they saw me soaking wet and worn thin, a silent acknowledgement of my desperate state. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, empathetic, not like a stranger asking out of politeness, but like someone who's seen enough wreckage to recognize it, to understand the silent plea in my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied, the word catching in my throat. My voice cracked halfway through the word, betraying my true condition. She didn't press, just nodded toward the back office, a subtle invitation. "Got some unclaimed deliveries back there. If you're looking for a warm spot, just for a bit. If you're looking for a warm spot, just for a bit." I wandered for a while, picking up old envelopes I couldn't open, their contents a mystery, and putting them back again. The place was nearly empty. A couple of homeless men huddled near the vending machines, their faces etched with weariness. An older woman talked to herself in the old sorting aisle, her voice a low murmur. I lingered near the back, pretending to read labels, really just staying dry, soaking in the unexpected warmth. I knew they'd kick me out once the clock hit 9, but no one did. The silence stretched, long and unbroken. The girl behind the counter, Clara, I'd learned later from a brief, mumbled introduction, waited until the few remaining visitors cleared out, their footsteps echoing through the cavernous space, and then walked toward me, with a broom in one hand and a look on her face. I couldn't read, a strange blend of pity and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. "You local?" she asked, her voice quiet. "No," I said, "just passing through." She nodded like she already knew that, a preternatural understanding. Then, as casually as if she were offering me a map or a cup of tea, she said, "My uncle helps people sometimes when they're in a rough spot. People like you." I didn't say anything, my guard instantly up. I didn't trust offers that came too easy, especially when I was at my most vulnerable. But I also hadn't eaten in 2 days, my stomach rumbling with hunger, hadn't slept dry in even longer, and the thought of not being in that damn car for a night, even just for a few hours, felt like mercy. A desperate reprieve just to talk, I said, my voice barely a whisper, trying to ascertain the terms. She smiled faintly. A small, knowing smile, like I'd passed some kind of test. A silent interrogation. I followed her to the back hallway, past the old employee break room, with its buzzing, ancient water cooler, its rusted pipes humming. A door was already half open, a sliver of light illuminating the dark interior. Inside was a man in his 60s, black slacks, maroon sweater, glasses that caught the light just wrong, reflecting an unsettling glare. He didn't smile, just motioned to the folding chair across from him, its metal legs scraping against the concrete. "Ethan, right?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "How'd you, Clara?" he said, as if that explained everything. A dismissive wave of his hand. I sat, my mind racing. He watched me like I was a photo he was trying to memorize. Every detail, every contour of my face. Then he said, "I've got a cot in the back room, out of the rain, some food, and a little something for the road if you want it. No questions asked." I looked around, shelves of sealed mail bags, their contents unknown, unsold stamps from decades ago, water damage creeping up the corners of the room, a silent testament to its age. Not much of an offer, certainly not a luxurious one, but it was dry, it was warm, and I was tired, bone-weary. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "No catch," he said too quickly, his eyes darting away for a split second. I should have left then, should have thanked them, and walked right back into the rain, trusting my gut, but I didn't. The lure of warmth and rest was too strong. That night, the cot smelled faintly of dust and old paper, a musty odor that clung to my clothes. A plastic tub near my feet had a pack of stale crackers and a bottle of tepid water. I ate them slowly, like it made it less desperate, savoring every crumb, every sip. I heard the main doors lock from the outside, a heavy thud that echoed through the silence, and I told myself that was normal, just the closing procedure. I told myself this was just kindness, an unexpected benevolence, until midnight came and went, and the silence deepened, becoming oppressive. I opened my eyes and saw the man. His name was Arthur. Through the break room window, standing perfectly still, watching, not moving, not blinking, just watching. His silhouette was a dark, unmoving presence. I turned away and tried to breathe quietly, hoping he wouldn't notice, hoping I was just imagining it. It was nothing, just me being paranoid, my mind playing tricks, but I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, my duffel bag had been moved. Nothing missing, not that I could tell, but it had been unzipped, the contents disturbed. The journal I kept, folded in my hoodie. Its pages were dog-eared, creased as if someone had gone through them. The pen inside missing. I found the pen later, snapped in half, under the cot. A deliberate act of destruction. I went to confront Clara. She stood behind the counter, as if she'd never moved, her face impassive. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which held a chilling emptiness. "People take what they think you won't miss," she said, her voice flat. I stood there waiting for her to say more, to explain, to offer an apology. She didn't. Later that day, Arthur appeared again. This time, he didn't offer a cot. He handed me an envelope. Inside, $300, crisp new bills. "No strings?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. "Most people say, no the first night," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Doesn't mean they stick to it. Doesn't mean they don't come back." I tried to hand it back, my instincts screaming at me to refuse. He didn't take it, just tapped the envelope, and walked off, leaving me with the unsettling gift. I stayed that night, stupidly, foolishly, thought maybe I was imagining it all, that I was just being overly cautious. I set up my own alarm, kept my bag under my arm while I slept, a futile attempt at security. Just before 2 a.m., I heard the door creak, not swing open, just creak, a slow, deliberate sound, and then it stopped. I waited until daylight, my heart pounding, and made my move. Caught a stray cart to block the door, its wheels squeaking loudly. I shoved open a side hatch I'd noticed the day before, a small emergency delivery access point. It wasn't locked, just latched. I slipped out into the back lot, sneakers soaked from the mud, air cold and heavy with rain. I didn't run until I heard footsteps behind me, slow ones, measured, like someone taking their time, confident in their pursuit. I ducked through a narrow alley, crossed a backyard, banging frantically on the side door of a house with lights on. A woman peeked out through the curtain, her face a mixture of alarm and suspicion, and I begged her through the glass to call the police. She hesitated. Who wouldn't? I looked like hell, disheveled, mud-stained and frantic, but she did. By the time the cops came, Arthur was gone, vanished without a trace. No one at the facility admitted he worked there. They said Clara had worked alone, the break room empty. No cot, no supplies, no record of anything I'd experienced. I didn't argue. I just left, putting as much distance as I could between me and that place. Weeks later, I stayed in a cheap motel 2 counties north. I checked the postal sorting facility's reviews out of morbid curiosity, searching for any corroborating evidence. Nothing unusual, all standard, 5-star reviews, but one review I found, through a cached search, showed up from someone named Theo. Don't stay, don't say yes. Some offers are harder to walk away from the second night. I never saw that review again. It had been deleted. Now even in daylight, when I pass an old empty building, I cross the street, giving it a wide berth. I never accept free help, never eat food. I didn't open myself. I sleep in my car. Yes, but I keep the doors locked, a crowbar in the passenger seat, a grim companion, and every time I close my eyes, I see that man's silhouette at midnight, staring through the glass like I belong to him, a chilling claim. So now I ask you, if someone offers you comfort when the world's kicked you to the curb, how do you know it's mercy and not a leash in disguise, a binding promise you can never break?